Hello, this is Margarita Monet from Edge of Paradise, and you are listening to the Metal Pit Podcast.
Welcome to the Metal Pit Podcast. I am your host, Blake. Make sure you check us out on our website at www.themetalpit.org. And you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at The Metal Pit and on our YouTube channel at The Metal Pit 666. And you can email this podcast at podcast@themetalpit.org if you have any comments, questions, album suggestions, or whatever. Now, today's episode is a special episode because we're not doing a discussion on a classic metal album, which we usually do. But this one, we're going to be talking about the Wacken Metal Festival, which I'm going to pronounce it Wacken. I hope that's right for people at least in Canada, can say Wacken. As one of my writers, Billy, was just there for the festival. Hi, Billy. How are you doing?
Not too bad, Blake. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And you gave us, if people follow us on Instagram, there was lots of posts from the festival, some reels of short videos of the bands playing. And this was your 10th visit to Wacken, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And when was your, I know COVID canceled too. When was the last one you were at before this one?
2019 would have been the last year. So it restarted in 2022, but I decided to skip it just because we didn't know what the travel situation was going to be. So to be on the safe side, I skipped that one.
Yes. And I was reading some, that was 20, well, they still had a full thing, I guess, didn't they?
Yeah.
I see. But,
full festival.
Yeah. Now they've just, because you told off, like you were talking about that you had to buy tickets the next day, which we'll probably get to, and if they sell 85,000 tickets, I guess they've only did that the last 3 years. So they must have increased it. Or I don't know. It's a little confusing because on Wikipedia, which I'm looking, it has paying attendees and then it has attendees. So it says last year there was 85,000 paying attendees, but there was 110,000 attendees. So I don't know what that means. They let 30,000 people in for free. I don't really know what that means. Do you know what that might mean?
I mean, that's a bit odd, but I would expect a couple thousand extra just for all the crew and everybody who's running the place. Because it's kind of like a whole city, right? This festival.
Yeah, so
sure
I don't
there's
know.
A few extra thousand just to run the festival and all the stands and stuff.
And it says the festival for next year sold out in 4.5 hours, which is the fastest I think it's ever sold out. It was 5 hours for this year's festival, it says, if this is accurate. Yeah. But anyway, it was just something I was reading. So first, let's see. Before we talk about that, you're in Toronto, Ontario, and you just attended the Lamb of God and Pantera show last night. So how was that concert?
Oh, it was good. It was, I literally just landed from Europe in the afternoon and then straight off to that show. So it was quite good. Sold out crowd at the Budweiser stage. Interesting mix of people. I'd probably say of the crowd, half were sort of very young. The other half kind of in their late 40s, early 50s. So a good mix of people. I thought Pantera did a pretty good job, right? Like it'll never be the same without Daryl and Vinny. But I mean, all things considered, like getting Charlie Benante and his name escapes me.
Zach Wilde.
Yeah. I mean, those are probably as good of a replacement. I don't like to use replacement, but as good of a stand-in you're going to get for 2023. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was quite good. They played probably a good hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes. They hit some deep cuts, all the popular songs. So yeah, I thought it was a good show. I was impressed.
And that Budweiser Gardens there in Toronto, it's probably 15,000 to 20 or something thousand. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 15 or 16 rings a bell. I think it's
Yeah.
somewhere around there. With all the the grass all sold out on the top.
And and you mentioned this before, we're gonna talk about off audio, I mean, about how expensive the beer was at Toronto show compared to in Europe. So we'll get to the beer at Wacken Festival here sometime. So first question, well, if anybody was following anything about Wacken, we saw there was a lot of rain and a lot of mud. So how did you deal with the weather for this show? Festival?
Yeah, so like weather is always crazy at the festival. So you're literally way up in like northern Germany. So unpredictable weather is the norm. So in my 10 years, I would probably say 5 years, it was extreme heat. So it's like 35 degrees and you're sunburned and it's too hot. And there's like very little covering for you. That's the one extreme, or it rains. And it rains and it rains. So this was probably the worst year, I think, in the worst year in the history of the festival for rain. It just created, like, I think they said about 25% of the campsites were unusable, just flooded. So that was a problem. Just walking around literally in the mud, like it goes right over your boots. I mean, every single footstep, it's like your feet just suction in the mud. But you plow through it, right? Like it's always going to be the con of the of this particular festival is the weather. There's no doubt about that. Unfortunately, you can't do too much about it. The organizers were, I think overall did what they could. They were putting down boards that you can walk on. They were putting chips, like wood chips, to soak up the mud. But it just kept raining and it kept raining, and it rained a week before the festival. So yeah, it was a pretty tough situation, but at the end of the day, all the benefits and the enjoyment, and being there with all your fellow metalheads from around the world, that kind of offsets the pain of the weather, because it was painful. And like I'd say, I was like, my first Wacken Festival was probably it was 2011. So I was a little younger there, so all the footsteps are a little easier. But what can you do? I mean, I'd probably say the average age of the festival is probably my age, in late 40s, early 50s. So you just kind of make do, and that's just part of what Wacken's all about. You got to deal with it.
Now, you read, people complain, of course, and there's the people, of course, that had tickets and then they couldn't go because they couldn't get there. How did you find the updates from the festival to people? Because you weren't even sure what was going to happen when you were there exactly. But how did you find how they handled it?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess a couple things on that front, right? So like I know it's very difficult for the organizers, and as I understand it, the police was involved, the city was involved, and I'm sure they got their insurance company involved. Like everybody's trying to make these decisions. And you don't know, will the rain stop? Will it not stop? So I would say, generally they sent out like a broad communication kind of once a day. And so, I guess in a perfect world, we would have got a little bit more communication. But, I got there early. I actually arrived on Tuesday. So, to some degree, some of the evolving situation didn't impact me. Given I was already on site. But I was getting worried. I remember Wednesday morning, that was going to be the first day of the festival. And that's where, first time in the festival history, they said full stop. Nobody else is getting in. The grounds are just too bad. So, so at the end of the day, 50,000 people got in of the 85,000 people. But I remember waking up Wednesday, grabbing my phone. I was in my tent on the grounds and reading. And so, wow, full stop, right? So nobody else is allowed to come. So that was huge. But the other thing that got me worried was, they're just saying we're going to have to take the festival day by day. They were like, we will do our best to put on a program, but we'll have to make that call every day. So literally in my mind, I'm thinking, well, wait, this may not even like continue. We may not even get a festival. And so long story short, they actually, with the exception of Wednesday, like where everything kicked off about 5 or 6 hours late, which is very unusual for the Germans. I mean, they run these things like clockwork, so something's wrong if the festival's not starting on time. Like I was literally there watching on the main fields, and they had the tractors going through, these massive tractors with tires taller than I am, and they're just they're just like scooping the mud and trying to make it better on the main stage area so people can stand up there. But yeah, so it didn't look, it was looking pretty grim for a while there on Wednesday, the start day. But every day we still had rain, but the weather got a little bit better. The rain let up. And by Wednesday night, the festival was running perfectly, like every other year. So very impressed with the organizers. They really, did a good job. And, unfortunately, what that did mean is, probably, like 35,000 people. And some of those people, you saw it online, were coming from South America, Canada, US, like, we're talking spending thousands on flights, arrived into Hamburg, Germany, and basically to find you're not getting in, right? So you just spend all that money and you're not getting into the festival. So I felt really bad for some of those people, like people from Australia, even, like just like massive expenses to get there, and they just didn't get in. So that's a shame.
Yes. Now, now you help me with some of these questions that I'm going to ask you because, well, you've experienced it, so you know the kinds of things that you can talk about. So you asked me to ask you, what was your worst Wacken experience this year? Now I'm going to assume it was the weather. So was there something besides the weather that would be the worst experience this year?
No, I think the weather's got to top it. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there really wasn't like a bad experience outside of the weather. I mean, the first day, as I mentioned, the festival kicked off about 5 hours, late. So like I did unfortunately miss a few bands, or what I'm not even sure, some of the cool bands I wanted to see, I didn't see them playing at all. So either they got cut, given they were running so far behind, or they were just putting them on different stages or squeezing them in. So that first day, even though they kicked off the festival, was a bit tricky to follow because you'd show up to a stage and the band you expected wasn't playing. So yeah, I mean, so that was a bit of a negative, but again, understandable given the circumstances. But yeah, weather hands down was the worst part.
Now, how many stages is there?
Yeah, so the stages are split up. So all the biggest acts play on the two main stages, and that's called the infield area. So they call those two stages harder and faster. So those stages are literally side by side, and they alternate one band and one band.
Okay.
So that runs very smooth. Off to the side, they have the next biggest stage, which is called louder. So you can see the theme: harder, faster, louder. So the louder stage is quite large too, but it's for the bands that are not quite big enough to play those two main stages. Then we have this area that's called the bullhead area. So you have two smaller stages called the headbanger stage and the wet stage, and that's where a lot of the cool smaller bands play who are playing the festival for the first time. So that's kind of a cool area there, and those stages can be playing at the same time as the other stages.
Yeah.
And then two other decent sized stages too. They have something called a wasteland stage and a Wackinger stage. And those two stages are in these two themed areas of the festival grounds. Like the wasteland is like this whole Mad Max area where, you know, if you picture the movie, they've set everything up to look like that. And the Wackinger area is very much like a medieval theme type area. So really you've got those 7 stages, and of those 7 you probably have like 5 running most of the time.
Oh, at the same time.
Yeah, because the grounds are just massive. And when you're standing there watching a band, like you're really not hearing the other stages, so it doesn't get in the way. Like you wouldn't even know it, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay, so what was your best Wacken experience this year?
So probably I mean, I'll state the obvious. So super happy that it actually, given I made the trip there and was literally camping on the grounds, that the festival actually continued. So that was pretty cool. But, you know, one thing, you know, and this is probably a great, you know, this is definitely a great thing every year. It's outside of the music, it's the camping. So I, you know, basically everyone who goes to the festival has to camp on site. So it's basically this massive farm. And so there are a few third-party providers that rent your tent. So I always do that. So months in advance, I rent a tent so I know I get there. I've got my tent is ready, my sleeping bag. There's a little chair, you know, there's one of those air mattresses. So I don't have to haul all that from like Canada. But it's the chatting with people there because of that setup where it's generally people who are coming from all over the world, just chatting with people, right? Like, so on my area, I had somebody from Taiwan. I had probably about 5 people from Australia. We actually had one German right there as well. And then we had people from Brazil, Ecuador. It was just, and then, you know, like in between bands, you come back to the tent and, you know, you're just chatting with people and like getting to know people from around the world with the same interests. It's just, that's just such a big part of the festival that you have to experience. Just the culture, right? I call it the culture of Wacken. Is just all these metalheads from around the world. And, you know, some people say 85,000 people, that's too many. You know, a lot of people, you know, that I talk to in Europe, they're like, oh, the festival is too big now. I go to smaller ones. But, you know, the size doesn't bother me, right? That's just so many more cool people that you meet. And everybody talks to everybody, right? Like you're standing there, language doesn't get in the way. People talk broken English and, you know, try to get through, and you're in the beer garden and you're talking to people from all over the world. Like that's just something that you got to experience with one of these big festivals. Like I love that. That's a huge bonus for me.
Now, is there anything that the festival could be better for you? Like that you think, oh, they should do this or they should do that, or maybe from talking to these other people around you, is there anything you heard that people would say, oh, I wish they did this instead, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, often, so a couple of themes come up, and not surprisingly, it can be weather related, right? Like you hear a lot of people talking about, you know, like, can't they move this festival out of northern Germany? But, you know, realistically, that's not going to work, right? Like, you know, all the history of the festival is in that little town, right? Like, the town of Wacken, it's about 2,500, 3,000 people live there. And then, this 1 week of the year, it blows up to like, 100K or whatever that number is.
Mhm.
So I don't think you can move the festival because you lose the history of the town and the holy ground. And so I don't think that's reasonable. I think little things that I think would be useful would be more covered areas. So whether that be the two extremes, the heat or the rain. So if there's actually more covered areas that you can get under, I think that would be better.
Mhm.
I mean, traditionally, there's been none. Like, kudos to the festival this time. They have these 3 beer garden areas, and they actually covered them. So that was kind of cool. Like, when it rained in the middle, at least some people can run and get out of the rain. But I think probably, having some covered areas for people to get out of the sun or the rain would be useful.
Now, what other have you attended any other festivals like that you can compare this to? I know you've been on the 70,000 tons of metal cruise, but have you been to any other ones?
Yeah, so a couple years I was a glutton for punishment. I was doing going to Wacken, and then immediately after, like the next weekend in the UK, they have Bloodstock.
Hmm.
So that's definitely a smaller festival, and apologies if my number's not right. I'm gonna guess somewhere in the 30K size. Maybe that's bigger now,
Hmm.
or a bit smaller now post pandemic, but. So that was an interesting festival, outdoors camping, very similar, but on a much smaller scale. I think in that festival you didn't get quite as much international attendance. You definitely had some, but not to the degree of Wacken. So you lose a little bit of that, and not as many bands, and not as many international bands. So a great festival, but I still didn't think it was up to Wacken caliber. The other festival that I went to 1 year, which is quite good in France, is Hellfest. And so
Hmm.
interestingly, that's slowly catching up to what I even think it might be, might even be bigger than Wacken now in terms of attendees. I think they've gotten over 100,000 at this point, but that's very similar. Again, outdoor festival, same amount of days, and equivalent artists from around the world. So yeah, so that one's becoming quite popular. But I guess for me, there's always this nostalgia. Wacken was the first festival I did. I do it every year, so for me, that's always the highlight for me.
And like I mentioned, you've been on the 70,000 tons of metal. Now and you're going again this year, which is in
Yeah,
February, right?
yeah,
Or not this year, but next year. I mean, February,
yeah.
and
2024.
that'll be your fourth one of that. But so we'll probably do a podcast about that after that one, so you can talk about that. But do you want to say anything about that? Like, if somebody wanted to do one of the two, which one should they do?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'd almost say you got to do both, Blake, because they're so different. But back to your previous question, like, how do the other festivals compare? So 70K tons of metal fixes a lot of problems that happen at Wacken, right? So you could pretty much take the weather out of the occasion, because everybody's got their own cabin. So you've got like a nice warm bed. If it's too hot, the AC's on. You got air conditioning. If it's raining, you go out. You can leave the outdoor area and go indoors. There's no mud, so you're not tracking through the mud. Like, you're not eating standing up. You can actually sit down at 70K tons of metal and have dinner at a table. and restaurants. And so, I probably say as I get older, I appreciate 70K tons of metal more because it's a little easier on the body when you hit the 50s, I would say. And I think I mentioned this on one of the podcasts we did when we talked about this festival, but huge bonus, Blake, every band plays twice. And I can't emphasize how valuable that is, because this year at Wacken, they had so many great bands. It's unavoidable. There was so much overlap. I think back. So I had a choice of doing Iron Maiden, or I love all types of metal, but I really am a big death metal fan. So I had to pick Iron Maiden or Deicide, right? Doing a special anniversary show of their Legion album. In the end, I chose Maiden because I did see Deicide in the US 2 or 3 times recently. So, but that sucked. I had to give up like multiple cool death metal bands to see that. And then very unusual was 2 bands that really clashed, Halloween and I'm having a mind blank now. Anyway, so Halloween and another major band playing a similar style. And I really wanted to see them both, but again, had to make a decision. So unfortunately, that was happening throughout the day. You literally had to pick one or the other, but you can plan much better on 70K because all the bands play twice.
Yes. Now, is that something?
Sorry, Blake. I just remembered. So that other band conflicting with Halloween was Amorphous.
Oh, okay.
So that was a shame, like having to, I was there with my friend. He went to see Amorphous. I went to see Halloween. Like we split up because we couldn't even agree together.
And because of the weather and so many people, it's kind of hard to go, like, say, watch half and then go to the other one because it's such a pain probably to try to travel right over there.
Yeah. So you're right. Like easier when it's no mud.
Yeah.
Because literally the mud's going to double your length of time to get from point A to point B. I did do it a couple of times, right? So there are a few stages that are a little closer. So I was able to pull that off a few times. But like if you're at one end to the other of the festival grounds, forget it. It'll never happen. You'll never make it.
Now, this is something I just asked, but do you think would you like it better if there was a few less bands maybe so that you wouldn't have to make these decisions? But
I guess it's an interesting question, right? Like at the end of the day, I guess my view is always better the more bands you have, right? Because then it's on us to make the decision, right? It's better to have too many cool bands than not enough good bands, and, right? So in the end, it's probably better to have more of a good thing than less of a good thing, even though it causes tough choices.
Yeah, and it's not like it's a festival just for, say, death metal or just for thrash metal. It's got every kind of genre in there, right? Hair metal, if they still call it hair metal, all the way up to whatever. So, so there's different people there that might not like everything like you do. There might just be somebody that likes the death metal bands and wants to see them, right? So, yeah.
No, exactly. And they even bring on Europe's really open to different types of music. Like they'll always bring on I didn't get to see them because again, a hard choice, but I like my classic rock too. They had Uriah Heep that were playing. That's an old band, but I wanted to see them. But in past years, they've had Deep Purple a few times, and I know you're a Deep Purple fan, Blake, and so it was cool to see a lot of some of that classic stuff that they go and put in there as well. So just a wide variety of music.
And a lot of bands record their Wacken show for DVDs. I know Arch Enemy did one there, and Twisted Sister and stuff. I had it here, but now I can't find it, of course. Oh, no, Twisted Sister, Slayer did one, Halloween, Saxon, Scorpions, I guess. Even Dimmu Borgir did one there. And I'm sure there's others. So, Oh,
And it works well because they're actually the majority of the festival is being streamed online. It's being streamed on German television. So all the cameras are there. Like
mhm.
you're watching, if you're up near the stage, like you have these massive cameras on these huge, like, counter levers that are moving the stuff over your head, and there's like cameras everywhere. So
Mhm.
everything's being filmed. So yeah, it really suits itself to bands doing live recordings.
Now, I was going to ask you, or maybe you wanted me to ask you this, I forget, but what would your favorite bands performed, or do you want to say, I don't know, your favorite band each day or something like that?
Yeah, I think I'll just throw out a couple bands. Some of it, when you're there by the fourth day, it becomes a bit of a blur what day it actually is.
Yeah.
Uh, but a few shows, and so always cool. I mean, there's the big bands that you're going to see. So for me, like Halloween and Iron Maiden, Creator, I mean, obviously those are going to be good shows. The interesting thing, Halloween and Creator, I actually just saw them here in Toronto like a couple months ago.
Mhm.
But when you see them here, it's on the massive stages and the full light shows and the fireworks and fire. So, that's pretty cool to see it. Like the production value is like, heads and tails above like a North American tour would be. Really enjoyed a Canadian sort of death metal band, Cataclysm. Love that band. They've got about 14 albums, been around a while. They just really know how to get the crowd going. So that was a really cool show. One of the surprises of the festival was this band called Drain. They're from California. They played crossover thrash. That was probably the funnest show I've ever been to. They were on one of the smaller stages, but I think they broke security's every rule. They kept it, inviting the crowd to bypass security and come on stage. Like, and multiple times the stage was filled with people. The singer kept diving into the audience. And this was so odd. The band insisted the crowd throw mud at them. And so there was no shortage of mud. So people were whipping the mud on the stage. The band members were covered in mud, but they loved it. Like, it was just the craziest show. Musically, the band's great. Like, if you like crossover thrash, you need to check out Drain. But they just put on the craziest show I ever seen. And I could just see security pissed off, right? They were not happy. Again, like, the Germans, they like to do things or organize and by the rules, and these guys broke every single rule. And it was so funny, Blake. Like, even the next day I went to see a show at that stage. The stage is still covered in mud everywhere from that concert. So I'm sure they got an earful after that performance, or they won't get invited back. But the other highlight, I'm a massive fan of Marty Friedman, the guitar player.
Mhm.
So for Megadeth, Marty Friedman joined on the stage and played his solos from the songs on Rust in Peace. So that's my favorite Megadeth album. I mean, I've been a fan of Marty since the 80s when he was doing his solo records. And so he actually had his own show the next day after he played with Megadeth, and he did his solo guitar show. I always wanted to see him. He lives in Japan, so we don't get to see him in North America too much, but I just love that performance. He had his band with him, and they were just all instrumentals, but it was fantastic. Like, if you're like a guitar nerd, then you'd love his solo stuff.
That's
So
cool.
Yeah, lots of cool stuff. And one last band I'll say, one of the cool things about the festival is you're going to see a lot of small bands you never heard. So I was just kind of walking through one of the stage areas, and there was this band called Sable Hills, and they were from Japan, and they play this thrash slash death metal mix. And I loved it. Never heard of them. You know, they barely speak English, but it was such a cool performance. The crowd loved them. So you get to see a lot of bands you'd never see in North America.
Yes. Now, so if somebody's saying, listening to us talk here and thinks, geez, I want to go to this thing sometime, what kind of advice do you have for people that are thinking about going? Now, you already mentioned about having somebody put up your tent, and that thing was easy. Yeah. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, first thing, you got to get your hands on a ticket. So already 2024 is sold out, but there's still a few options, right? So right now you can actually put your name on a waiting list. Go to the www.wacken.com website, Wacken Open Air, and they have a waiting list because people who bought these tickets, they end up with, like, you know, credit card problems and payment problems. So often there'll be some tickets that'll come back on. So you know, that's probably not your best option because, you know, most people, the transactions go through. But Wacken runs a ticket center to resell tickets. So important to know that the Wacken tickets are personalized. They have your name. So you have to show your name and ID in order to get in. So Wacken created their own ticket center. And so probably about, you know, 4 months before the festival will start, they'll open that up. And so people will start selling their tickets. So many of my friends, they get tickets that way. They're not like me buying them the minute they go on sale. They go through this ticket center. So no guarantees that you'll get it, but it is all run by Wacken. So it's up and up. Everything is fine. But if you think about it, like 85,000 people are buying these tickets like on August 6th, 2023. And that's for August 2024. So, you know, a lot of people are going to have family things or their job situation change or something. So there'll always be like tickets that are going to come up for sale. Yeah. So that would be the first thing. Watch out for that. The other thing I would say, a big lesson learned through this festival, because they literally, you know, the majority of people will, you know, people in Europe, they drive there. So they drive, they pull out their tent and they put it up, or they come in campers. But, you know, as we talked about the weather, they had to stop those people from coming. So the one thing that was allowed to come in at all times are these buses. So if you go to the Wacken website, there's travel partners. Like I've used the same bus company. It's called it's actually a French name, Mondial International, and they actually will run like coach buses. You reserve it months in advance, and the buses will pick you up in Hamburg City or Hamburg Airport and bring you onto the site. And these buses, you know, were the only thing that was guaranteed to come into the festival this year. So if you're coming from out of town, like, I highly recommend using these coach buses, because the one thing we learned this year, if you're coming in by car, you can get stopped if the weather's bad enough. The buses don't have to come on the ground, so they don't get stuck in the mud. So that would be another major tip, is to use those buses. I've done it for all 10 festivals. The bus has never even left late once. It just runs to perfection.
Now, if, say, the weather was good, is it and I know there's not many hotels because it's a small city, but is it possible to, if you book a hotel in advance, to go to and from the festival on each day if the weather was good and stuff?
It'd be pretty tough. It'd be pretty tough, Blake. Like, I think there's like, if you get to the, like outside of the immediate city, some of the neighboring city, there is some inns, and like I do find a lot of the locals start renting a room. I guess it's a good way for them to make money.
Yeah.
So there's little stuff like that you can do, but it's such a small scale that, I mean, if you are lucky enough to get it, great. But like it's just going to be a major hassle, right? Like driving, because you can't drive in from these grounds
Yeah.
and leave your car on the, like it'd just be too difficult. Like I
Yeah.
know some people do it, they walk, or maybe some of these little inns will run a shuttle bus, but then you're on their timeline, right? So like I just can't see it being done well.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the metal culture of Wacken?
Yeah, and I think I kind of touched on it earlier when we were kind of talking about, what was good. Yeah, again, it's just about, here you have like, you're in this farm in northern Germany. You've got 85,000, normally 85,000, this year 50,000 people from all over the world with the exact same interest as you.
Mhm.
And so just that, feeling of belonging and being part of the group. And we have nothing like that in North America. You go to a show or, you go to, I guess Montreal has heavy Montreal, but again, much smaller scale and without this massive international crowd. So, and you see it everywhere, right? Just everybody talking and, there's the pre and post parties for Wacken in Germany where everybody goes and gets together. So those are great. And everybody helps everybody. Like people were getting, like, women were getting stuck in the mud everywhere, and men, like literally where they couldn't lift up their leg out of the mud and they were falling over. And like, 10 people would come running to help them up. And so everybody's helping everybody. There's a whole camping area in the festival called Wheels of Steel for people with disabilities,
Mhm.
and they have like a lot of great programs for people with disabilities. They have their own camping area dead next to the stage. They have like a special area for them to get to the stage. Then they all have like risers off the ground that they can sort of go, and if you have a wheelchair, you can kind of park your wheelchair there. But as great as the program is, the mud's a problem, right? For a
Yeah.
lot of people. But I kept seeing like wheelchairs getting stuck in the mud and 20 people coming over and either pushing the wheelchair, or everyone would pick up the wheelchair, like 4 or 5 guys, and take the person where they wanted to go. So just, it's just very inclusive. It's just this special feeling when you're there, right? And maybe for Europeans who go to festivals all the time, for those of us, in North America who don't have this, it's a special thing that you're not going to get anywhere else. So that's what I consider the culture of Wacken.
Yeah, and that was my next question about disability. So we don't have to, like, if it was accessible, but you already talked about that. Now, what about the bands? Like you're saying about how bands are playing at the same time. Is there a schedule? Is there an app or a website you can look at so you know who's playing where at the
Yep.
festival?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So a few days before the festival, they'll put up a running order on the site, so you can always print that thing out. But Wacken actually has a pretty cool app. And so the app will actually have all the, it'll give you like all the timelines for the bands by stage. You could like go and pre-populate what you want to see. So you have your own kind of calendar. It'll actually pop up and give you alerts. Hey, Halloween's playing on this stage in 20 minutes, so get there. So all that's pretty good. And The app is quite good too, because it has I use it all the time, even though I've been to 10 times. You're only there like once a year, but the map, you can open it up on your phone, and you have like a little dot for where you are, and when you're trying to find something, you can make sure you're heading in the right direction. So that's pretty cool. But I mean, unfortunately, again, not their fault. The app didn't work great that first day, because with the weather and all the delays, all the bands were out of order. But the other 3 days, it ran perfectly.
Now, some of the questions I have for you, you're answering them while you answer other questions. So
okay. When it comes to this festival, I can ramble on forever.
So I don't need to really ask you about your interaction with metal fans, because you've already kind of discussed that. What about the pre and post Wacken parties at the Nightlight Metal Club in Hamburg? I know you were at the one before anyway.
Yeah, no, I actually made it after too.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, that's cool. So the Hamburg actually has a number of like heavy metal clubs in the city, but the one I always go, as far as I know, this is the most famous and biggest one, although the club itself is quite small. It's called the Nightlight, and so they do and basically everyone drinks in the street, because it's like a small bar, but essentially the street gets blocked off with people, and so that's just a great event. I always go there, and generally it's everybody coming in from around the world. So again, just having a few beers and talking to metal fans from all over the world is always a blast. So that probably runs, I mean it's a bar that's open all the time, but this heightened events probably happen about 3-4 days before the festival, and about 3 or 4 days after. So if anyone's going, highly recommended. You can go look at the website, the Nightlight, you'll see it there. It's kind of in Hamburg in the Reeperbahn area, so that's where all the parties and clubs and crazy stuff is, so easy to get to. So yeah, I mean, I consider that an actual part of the event, right? I go there, the day or two before the festival, and then literally the day I get back, we go and do it again. So highly recommended.
Now, what is the food and drink situation like at Wacken? Sure, it's a lot of fast food, but
yeah. So obviously no fine dining. So but I mean, there stands everywhere, right? Like serving food. And so I mean, when I think about some of the stuff that I ate, like a lot of bratwurst and like German sausage, or a burger, or kind of a doner or Chinese food. They'll give you a little bowl of like noodles or something. So I mean, just endless stands. So eating's not a problem. And then the beer is pretty cool. Like beer, I mean, no shortage of beer. Beer is everywhere. And one interesting fact, like, because, Wacken organized, they use this ground. I mean, was the 32nd or 33rd year of the festival. So they actually built like under the grounds of the festival, beer pipelines. So it's sending the beer across the different parts of the festival. So you could get like beer quickly wherever you are. So that's pretty cool. The other thing that's interesting, I posted a pic of this the other day, is they actually have people that walk around, and they have like, they put this mini beer keg on their back. Like, I guess they're students doing a summer job. And so they're walking around, and, you have your cups. And they have like these little tap guns, and they just fill your beer on the spot, right? You don't have to leave the show to go get a beer. So that's pretty cool. So they've made getting a beer as easy as like humanly possible for a music festival. So that's pretty cool. I mean, there's not a lot of beer selection. Like, you're pretty much getting the beer that's sponsoring the festival. Okay. But so be it, right?
Yeah, I was just going to ask that actually.
It was Beck's beer probably for the first forever. And this year it was actually a different German brewery for the first, or unless it was last year, may have been the first year, but they're running it now. So basic German beer is fine.
Now, what would a glass or whatever a beer cost you then, Canadian, say?
Yeah, so a decent sized glass is like $5.50,
Mhm.
and a liter is like $10. So that's when you're on the festival grounds. But you could, like they literally have like all over the festival in the camping areas, they have like little markets. There, wherever there's a shower and bathroom camp, there's a market. But you could go there and buy a can of beer for $2. They literally have like a market that they build on site, and people will go there and buy like 24 cans of beer, and they're paying like $2 for a can of beer there. So there's lots of ways to get like cheap beer at the festival. But even like when you're right at the stage and you're buying the more expensive beer, still much cheaper than we would pay here in North America for sure.
And is there like they're selling merch and everything like that there too? I'm assuming, of course.
Yeah, I imagine merch is probably a good chunk of the profits when all this is said and done. But yeah, I mean, I don't even know how many there'd be, maybe 5, 6, 7 giant merch stands throughout the festival. And it's all Wacken branded merchandise. I mean, one thing I always get is the basic t-shirt. Like, it has the logo in the front and it has every band written in the back. So I've been collecting those every year I win. So it's kind of cool. Like you flip it over and it's like, oh yeah, I remember that band, or yeah, I remember seeing that band. So that's kind of cool. And then all the bands that come, there's other merch stands, and so they'll actually sell their own merch. And often they'll do a special shirt for Wacken. Like this year, Creator had a really cool one, and it actually said Wacken. It was a special shirt for Wacken Open Air, and so that was pretty cool. Like Maiden's done it. They didn't do it this year, but a few years ago they did a special Wacken Eddie T-shirt, and so keep your eye out for that. If you're there, you can find some pretty cool T-shirts that you won't find anywhere else.
Now, are the smaller bands maybe selling CDs and stuff there too, or
no?
No.
So I mean, you won't see the band selling it. Like you actually will have like there's a bunch of vendors who obviously they open stands on site selling everything from clothes to patches to you always have vendors selling boots, making a killing like in a year like this. But they also have a lot of vendors selling like CDs and albums. And so sometimes you might find it, but like, for example, I mentioned that Japanese band, Sable Hills, like nobody was going to be selling that. Like I'm going to have to sort of order that from Bandcamp when I get back. The bands just don't have any way to kind of get, they're locked away in the artist area. And so there's just no interaction to sell their stuff.
Yeah, and you've already got your ticket for next year, and they've already mentioned some of the bands. I don't have that listed here. But what do you think about the bands that have already been announced? Like, are you excited about any of the ones that they've announced so far?
Yeah, so some cool bands, right? Like and again, they announced 33, and so there's going to be 100, probably 200 more. So this is sort of the tip of the iceberg. The only headliner that was announced was Scorpion. So I mean, I don't know, I'm Luke. I mean, if there's nothing else playing, I'll kind of go see them. Amin Amarth is going to be there, so they're always fun to watch. There's some cool thrash bands that are there. Violence is going to be playing there. So yeah, I would say there's probably like out of that 33 list, probably like 7 or 8 bands that I would definitely go see for sure.
And I did notice the Canadian band Unleash the Archers is going to be there this
That's right.
year.
Yeah, no, exactly. I saw that. Yeah, I would definitely go check them out for sure.
I think they were supposed to be there probably the one of the pandemic years or something, if I read correctly, and so they got canceled. So, and we already talked about the bands playing at the same time thing. And there's really nothing, you can't do anything about that. You just have to pick the band you want to see. And they do meet and greets. Now, did they still do that very much this year because of the problems? Did they still do that? Do you know?
No, yeah, it was running pretty much like clockwork this year. I mean, I passed by the meet and greet stage, and probably the last 2 days I was going by there quite a bit, and everything was running as normal. So yeah, that seemed to be working well.
Now, the festival hasn't always been on this site, isn't that correct? Didn't they move it to this site or something?
Yeah, I mean, it might be in the 90s.
Yeah.
It was started because I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I think the first festival might have had 3,000 people. So they definitely weren't kind of, didn't need this kind of a space. But I'd say they've been on here for sure for at least half their years. Definitely for all since 2011, when I've been going, for sure they have. I just don't recall how far back it goes.
Well, okay, it said this according to Wikipedia. It started in 1990, but there was only 6 bands at that one, and there was only 800 people.
Okay.
But of course, they didn't. I read somewhere, I have to look through this, but they didn't really start having well-known bands like probably 5 or 6 years after they started. And I think Halloween was one of the first ones, I think, of the well-known bands. But yeah, the attendance has increased. 2007, they had 60,000 people, which was the biggest crowd up till that point anyway. So that's when they became here. Then they had 75,000 for a bunch of years till the pandemic. So they must have added more space for these last 3 years, because now they're up to 85,000 people that can attend or whatever.
Yeah.
So, is there anything that I missed that I should ask you about?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd say, which is kind of interesting, Blake, is Wacken was always a 3-day festival. Always was a 3-day festival. Obviously, the 2 years got canceled, given the pandemic. Then they came back in 2022, and then they wanted to kind of give the fans a 4th day. And so it was a bit messy. They were charging a surcharge for the 4th day in 2022. As I mentioned, I didn't go, but some of the main headlining bands for that didn't actually show. So it was a bit of a disaster that day. So this year, they actually gave us everybody a full 4th day for free. But interestingly, this coming year in 2024, it's staying at 4 days. So it's looking like 4 days may become the norm now.
Yeah, because I know I wasn't paying attention to the days, but I saw Iron Maiden played on the Saturday night, and I was thinking, oh, this is probably the last day because Iron Maiden's playing. But then I saw, oh, they're still playing on Sunday too. But I didn't really remember any really big bands on the Sunday. Was there any big ones on the Sunday?
Yeah, so just it moves back one day though, because the festival official days were Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And Sunday everybody goes home. I think Maiden may have Friday night actually. Yeah, so you're right. Like I clearly got this sense on Saturday, like there was no major closing band. The last band was Two Steps from Hell, I think they're called, and they do classical music, heavy metal, like with orchestras and that kind of stuff. So yeah, like I did find that 4th day, although there were good bands like Voivod and on that last day, and Marty Friedman. But yeah, it did seem like there wasn't as many big name bands that day.
Yeah. Well, I think this was very informative to people that might want to go now. Now they might not be able to go next year, like we say, it's sold out, and there might be a few tickets like that come available.
Yeah.
But you say there's a waiting list, so it's probably pretty long already.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is to, as I mentioned, a couple months before the festival, just go to the website and they'll have a ticket center, and people will be selling their tickets. Like all my friends have generally had pretty good success getting tickets there. So no guarantees, of course, but you might get lucky that way.
Yes. Okay, so what's the next concert for you? Do you have one lined up? You know, what's next?
Probably, I think the next one that I bought a ticket for is not for a little bit. Cannibal Corpse, I think.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that's a little out there. I know there's a couple shows in Toronto that I might kind of take day by day decisions,
Mm-hmm.
but it's been a crazy run. I mean, it felt like in 2023 all the bands were touring.
Yeah.
Like I was going to see a show like, at least once every week or two for months, then going to Europe. And so yeah, I don't mind a slight pause is okay by me. Catch my breath.
Well, yeah, I know when the pandemic happened, a lot of bands were like thinking, well, we can't tour, so let's make an album. But then some of them, they made their album and then they still couldn't tour. So some of them are even making another album before they tour.
Yeah.
Because their album's been out for so long.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, thank you for talking to me about this today. I think this was great and very interesting. And we'll do this again after you go on your cruise in February. And anything else you wanted to add about this before we say goodbye?
No, I think that does it, Blake. Thanks for having me talk about it.
Yes. And I will mention one thing. Of course, you're going to write up some reviews and stuff of the days and things. So that'll be on our website. So keep your eyes out for that on our website, themetalpit.org, and there'll be some features on that. And I know we had two of our other writers were in Norway at the Beyond the Gates Festival, and there will be stuff about that. So we got a lot of festival stuff to post on our website in the next few weeks or so. So make sure you check our website out for that. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks, Billy, for all this great information. And goodbye, everybody.